what's going on? Welcome back to the Evans Garage. Today we're going to be working on my 1993 Dodge W250 and we're going to be rebuilding the front drive shaft. So we're just under the truck here. As you can see, out of the front of the transfer case, this is a double Cardon joint. And you can see here, here's my issue. The front U-joint has tons of play in it. So I'm going to need to replace that U-joint. Since I'm taking the front drive shaft out, I'm also going to rebuild that double Cardon joint on the other side of the drive shaft. All right, so here's everything you'll need to rebuild the front drive shaft. I like to stick to genuine Spicer Dana parts because those are OEM spec for these axles and they're typically the best quality. I also like to stick to non-greasable U-joints as the greasable paths within the greasable U-joints cause an area for failure, and typically over time they end up gumming up and don't work anyways. So you'll need 3 universal joints. You'll need the ball seat repair kit. So here's this part number here, 211009X. Here's the universal joints, 5811X. And if you want to, while you're in there and you have the front drive shaft out, you can replace the front pinion seal. It's 42449. So it was in model year 1993 that they made changes to the front drive shaft. They switched from the 7260 universal joint to the 7290. So you got to make sure that if you have a 1993 truck, that you use the 7290s, and if you have the 1992 and before, you use the 7260s. All right, so I've got the front drive shaft out. A couple things to note when you're taking the front drive shaft out. I made a couple of marks just with a punch right here, right here, right here. Also made a mark right here, and then on the transfer case as well. I'm not sure if these are internally balanced on their own or if they're balanced with the transfer case of the front axle, but it's a good idea as good practice to do this anyways for anything driveline related that has balancing. So same way as it comes out, it's the same way it goes in. So I've marked, you can see the punch marks here, here, and here. So when I take the U-joints out and put them back in, I'm going to make sure all these are also placed the same orientation with the new U-joints. All right, so you can see right away when I took the front drive shaft out, we've got all the needle bearings are missing in here. The seals are broke. One of the seals was on there. And you can see this front drive shaft, or front U-joint, is just absolutely toast. So hopefully we didn't do any damage to this slip yoke itself, but we'll see once I press this out of here. So I'm going to start by disassembling this drive shaft. Just to note, there is only one way that this slip yoke can go on. There's a groove on the inside of the shaft right there that's wider than the rest of them. We'll press this out in a minute. So I was curious to see how the center portion ball was greased, and there actually is a nipple in here. So on your truck, you could potentially grease the center ball. So when you're going to grease these 2 U-joints, if they're greasable, don't forget about the center portion here. I have non-greasable U-joints that I'm putting in, but in this center one, I'm imagining that this gets reused. So don't forget to grease that as well, because that nipple is going to stay there. So you can see right now, this one's not in too bad a shape. I can hear it kind of squeaking though a little bit, so one of the cups might be bad, but it's not terrible overall. All right, before we press this out, just make sure to take out the inner C-clips here. There's one on each side, on this side and then on the other side. So just get a punch and a hammer and you'll be able to pop that out. Oh yeah, that one was toast. And here's the other one, also toast. No needle bearings at all. So I'm just going to reassemble with the new U-joint and the slip yoke. Take the 2 caps off, slide it in like this, get one of your caps started. Press the bottom in first. We'll put our cap on the other side and press the cap on. Alright, I'm going to put one of the spring clips in now that I have this one cap pressed on. So make sure those needles are all in there and not skewed. Both clips are seated fully. You know, make sure they're seated fully so they don't pop out and your U-joint falls out. And make sure it's not binding. This has a reasonable amount of force in there. All right, and starting with the disassembly of this, same thing. We got to take the inner C-clips out. So there's 4 on each U-joint. We'll just rotate this around and start to punch them out before we can press both the U-joint. So this is about to come apart here. I'll show you that. I got pressed 3 of the caps off, and now this is going to come disassembled. First look at the ball assembly. And here's this side. Okay, we'll see if I can disassemble this side. We'll clean everything up and I'll show you the parts again. So I've got the double cardan ripped apart, and it's a good thing I did decide to rip it apart because 3 of these caps, I don't know if you can tell, but 3 of these caps are dried out to the point where the needles are pretty much falling apart. So I have everything cleaned up now. You can see just how everything's put together. There's a seal, and then in there are those inner, I guess, socket holders for the balls. So there's 3 of those. And then underneath it is where that spring rests. The challenging piece is going to be replacing this, because this is a press fit onto this little stud that's in there. And you can't really put anything against this because this is like a dust shield. And you don't want to damage the dust shield. It's very, like, it's thin metal, so it'll bend easily. So need to find a way to take this off. I might have to grind it and then hit it with a punch without damaging the inner shaft. But you could always opt to not replace it. Like, it does look like it's in pretty good shape overall. I can see maybe some just like minor pitting on the back end there. Probably nothing that's gonna cause noise, but here's the new one. I'm in here. I'm gonna attempt to replace it anyways, even if it takes me an extra hour to get that off. All right, this isn't going as well as I had hoped, but essentially I was grinding off the ball here and I still can't get it off. What I'm gonna do is remove the 2 welds here for this dust shield. Okay, so I drilled that out and knocked it off the chisel. So I've got access to the rest of that ball now. I can order another one of these, but I really don't want to because that's gonna be probably over a week out. So I'm gonna see if I can maybe salvage this, flatten it out. Okay, and finally it's moving. I've got this little tie rod puller on there. You can see the gap at the back. It's finally pulling off this stupid shaft. Okay, so I've got the old ball off. I cleaned up the spot welds from that dust shield, and I tried my best to kind of salvage it. It's in pretty good shape still, nice and flat. I just flattened it out in the shop vise, so I'll be able to get this back on kind of just like that, and I'll ensure it's seated well with no gap on the sides. So the kit notes that the new ball might have a larger chamfer on one side, or they could be symmetrical. These look to be about the same, so it shouldn't matter which direction we put it on. If it has a larger chamfer on one end, then start it with that side, so we can get started. All right, I just wanted to show you what it looks like without the cardan joint and just the ball socket itself. So you can see this dust shield that I'm going to be planning on reusing. I'm going to show you why it's not a huge deal that this is a little bit deformed, because the main goal of it is just to keep the dust away from the inner seal and ball socket end. So this is going to be, as long as the shield isn't getting in the way, this is going to be kind of rotating like that as the drive shaft spins. And then on the inside, you can see where the ball is and the actual seal. So the seal itself, let me take this dust shield off. This is the actual seal itself that's doing all the sealing. So we'll put that on there and you can see how much of that ball is actually exposed. It's just the end of it, depending on the angle of the drive shaft. So not a huge deal. If I were to do this job again, I think I would order this ahead of time, just in case you have trouble taking this off. And then that way you have a new one of these. You don't have to worry about damaging it too much. And then just tack weld on the new one, press that guy on, replace the seals on this side, and you're good to go. The other thing I did while I'm in here is I tested out this grease nipple and I pumped grease through it just to make sure that this was working okay. Okay, so I'm going to disassemble this portion of the drive shaft. There's the seal. Take that out first. So note how the seal goes in there. Has a spring on this side that goes down. Underneath it should be a small washer. So underneath it are the seat support washers. That's what they're called. 3 of them. 2, 3. Well, this one was actually busted a little bit. Now underneath the seat support washers should be a larger spring. Larger washer, and then at the very bottom is the spring. There's the spring. All right, so I pre-greased everything. I just wanted to note in the new kit, 2 springs. One of them is a little bit taller than the other, just what I'm doing is I'm matching up the one that is the same size as the other one that was in here before, which is the shorter one. So I'm not going to use this taller spring. So I pre-greased everything, including all the parts going in. First is the spring. After that, there's a thick washer. It goes on top of the spring. Then the 3 seats for the ball with the thick edge down. And then there's a thin washer that goes on top of those 3 seats. And then the seal goes on top, again with the spring down. Okay, I'm gonna weld this dust shield back on. We've got it clamped into place. We'll test with the other end of this socket, make sure I'm centered. All right, we are good. All right, so I'm ready for reassembly now. I've got that dust shield welded on, grind it down. Bit of an update here. I've been struggling trying to get this back together. A couple things I've learned about the universal joint sizes. So for the entire duration that they made these front drive shaft assemblies, the CV joint assemblies that had the 2 U-joints here and here, they were the same size for the entire run up until 1993. I assumed that all 3 universal joints were the same in this drive shaft assembly, so I assumed that all 3 were going to be 7290 series, but they're not. This one's a 7290, so this is the one that differs between 7260 and 7290, and then these 2 are actually slightly smaller than the 7290, only by a 1/16 of an inch. So in here we have 2 and 9/16 is what this is, and between the clip diameter of the 7290s is actually 2 and 5/8, so it's only off by a 1/16 of an inch between the clips, the inner clips, but it's enough that when I tried to press this in, put a clip on this side and then press it back the other way, the C clip machined part on the cap is not showing, so I can't put the C-clip on this side. So this universal joint is actually just a little bit too big, which means I had to do a little bit of research and find the correct part number for the Spicer non-greasable Life Series U-joints. Correct part number is 5795X for the Spicer non-greasable Life Series U-joint. All right, so the correct U-joints showed up. Again, these are for the double Cardon joints, 5795X, applicable for all your first-gen Cummins. And then this is for a 1993 for the 7290 and not the 7260 series front U-joint. I don't know what it is about these Spicer Life joints, but as much as I preach them, there must be something wrong with the quality control, or if they had a bad batch of these U-joints, but the dust seal seems when you press them on, these are a hard plastic dust shield. It's not the actual sealing for the inner part of the U-joint, but the dust shield, every time you press them on, they seem to crack. I've had that happen on multiple of the U-joints now. Even the old ones I had here, seems they just crack as you put them on. So I'm not sure what's up with that. But again, they don't do the sealing portion on the U-joint, so I'm not overly concerned, but the dust shield portion of it is not working, so a little bit frustrating. All right, so we've got that first part of the U-joint pressed in and both the C-clips in there. Just checking this to make sure it's not too tight. Now we're at the point where we can insert the next part of the CV joint. Make sure my punch marks are in the right spot, here and here. I'm gonna go ahead and put one of the caps on, and then we'll get the other side started here too. Looks like I've got enough room for one of the C-clips. And then I'm going to take that over to the press to have a cup larger and press down on this side. There's a bit of light pressure. Looks like I have enough room for the next C-clip. We'll take the pressure off and then check if there's any binding. No binding. All right, next we're going to throw the U-joint into this Throw our first clip in. For the next clip, we'll let the pressure off and then check for any binding. That's pretty good. Now we'll go attach it to the rest of the CV. So we'll have to seat it into the ball at the same time that we get this U-joint seated in there. There we go, it's seated onto that ball. We'll throw one of our caps on. I'm gonna seat this cap in there first on the press, and I'll come back here and I'll be able to push the whole thing in a little bit, and then I'll put the other cap on. All right, it looks like I can get one of the snap rings on there. So I've got this U-joint in, all 4 inner C-clips. I've double checked all my inner C-clips. I have all 8 in there. At this point, I'm just gonna check and see if there's any binding. It all feels really good. What I'm gonna do at this point is put in a couple squirts of grease. Make sure that center ball is fully greased up. Yeah, so I'm starting to see some grease come out the back hole. That's good. So that means we're full of grease inside that cup. We're ready to throw on the slip yoke. Okay, so the last thing I did was put some fresh grease on these splines. And then we'll get our hose clamp on there and tighten it up. We'll make sure this moves with no binding. All right, the last thing that we're gonna do is make sure that we have these 2 C-clips on so it sits into the pinion just fine on the axle. At this point, what we should do is take this to a driveline shop and get it balanced. I'm just gonna throw it back in the truck and we'll go for a drive down the highway in 4-wheel drive, see if we have any vibrations, and if there's no vibrations, then I'm just gonna leave it like that. All right, let's go ahead and get it back in the truck. All right, I'm gonna attach it to the transfer case first. Line up the punch marks that you made on the transfer case and the drive shaft. We'll throw that back up there. These get tightened down to 65 foot-pounds. These 4 small bolts get tightened to 21 foot-pounds. So we'll line this up. We'll make sure our C-clips are sitting just inside of the flanges right here, so your caps don't pop off, and then we'll get it tightened down. It's also a good idea on all these bolts and the ones that go to the transfer case to put some red Loctite. At this point, we've got the drive shaft back in, and this job could be considered complete. We rebuilt the front drive shaft, the double cardan, the slip yoke U-joint as well, and we've got everything replaced. So overall, not too bad of a job rebuilding that front drive shaft. Really the key thing I think that I learned through this entire process is make sure you order the right U-joints ahead of time. Also order that dust shield ahead of time so that way in case you need it, you can use it. Otherwise, it's really just replacing 3 U-joints just with a little special ball joint in the center of 2 of them. So that wraps up the rebuild for the front drive shaft on this first gen Cummins. Hopefully this helped if you're looking to rebuild your front drive shaft in your first gen, and stay tuned for the next video. Cheers.